disorder, and they showed that they said that they were experiencing homelessness upon getting admitted at Rikers. So they had those two things in their record. See if there's anything. We got this number, I guess the bottom corner. Between 2015 and 2018, about 2,900 people self-reported experiencing homelessness while incarcerated on Rikers Island. And so that's, I think, it was an indicator of how we got this estimate. And then, we did a snapshot. So like on one day in 2021, what did the population look like? 91% were cisgender men. Only 8% were cisgender women. Rikers is mostly a men's prison, but there is a facility that is for women. It's called Rosie's. And Rosie's also has folks who identify as transgender. So it found that 1% identified as transgender women and 0.1% as transgender men. And this is just a one-day snapshot. I think the numbers could be a bit different if you looked at the year. And then the percentages in the bottom left corner just capture, again, how we got that 2,500 estimate of people needing supportive housing just based on the substance use, percentages, mental health needs, severe mental illness needs. We can go to the next slide. So what was interesting about that 2,500 number, I said, we wanted to look at the cost of having these folks in being incarcerated at Rikers, what the cost is for the year compared to if they were awaiting their sentencing and trials in a supportive housing model, which is the most intensive, I would say, of the models, like of transitional rapid rehousing, emergency housing. The most intensive was services is supportive housing. And so comparing the two models for the year, it cost $1.4 billion for the city to incarcerate 2,500 people on Rikers. But instead, if we had them housed, it only costs $108 million for all those folks for the year. So the city could be saving $100.2 billion if they instead put their resources and attention into housing. And so that is really what we drilled on in City Council and our advocacy efforts. And a lot of our great partners used our numbers too from this report, which was really great. We actually saw City Council end up advocating for supportive housing numbers, and we'll see if if the mayor accepts that in his budget in the end. But it was really reassuring to see that City Council validated our thoughts with supportive housing. Okay, and then I think that might be my last one.
There we go. Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emma. So now we are going to go to our presenters. Again, we already did a quick round, of introductions, but again, just to do a really brief one. So first, our first presenter, Rita. Rita designs and monitors therapeutic programming for all in-house client populations in transitional housing programs. And she has been with the Providence House for the past 10 years and has been a social worker in New York City for over 35 years, working in a range of areas. So we're very excited to have Rita join us today. In addition, we also have Christina. Christina is the Director of Supportive Housing at the Osmond Association. She supervises the operations staff, budgets, and service delivery for a portfolio of housing programs. She is an avid advocate and speaker for the Justice Impacted. Our third speaker, unfortunately, was not able to join us today, and that individual was Samantha Magistro, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Bronx Pro Group. So we're very excited to have these two presenters on today to talk about the social service provider component of support services in housing for the justice involved, as well as the housing provider and development side of it as well. And again, I'm so sorry. My voice has been going in and out for like 3 weeks now. I don't know what's going on. Sorry you have to hear this.
Maybe you're reacting to the particulates in the air.
Actually, yes, because this started a week ago.
Mhm.
Well, not entirely, but it got worse a week ago. But in any regard, we're very excited to have the both of them here today in order to share their years of knowledge in this field. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to advance to the next slide and pass it on to Rita.
Hi. So, first of all, I thank you for inviting me to speak, and it's a pleasure to be doing this with Christina. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Providence House. So I think you can go to the next slide. Oh, maybe not. Is the next slide an overview? Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
so let's go to the next one. Sure.
Okay.
There. No. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So, Providence House was started by a bunch of sisters. Sister Elaine Roulet, about 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, was going into the prison up at Bedford Hills in New York City. And what she noticed is that a lot of women, when they were getting paroled, had nowhere to go. And so it was at the time when there were Catholic sisters were living in convents, which were large places that could hold 15, 20, 30 people, but there were very few of them left. So there were only a few people rattling around in these big old buildings. And she said, well, this is crazy. Come live with us. So it was a very organic thing. Somebody saw a need. The women needed a place to live. They were getting in trouble if they didn't have a place to live and ended in the shelter system or rearrested. So, so it kind of worked out nicely. So the program kind of evolved into an agency, basically. And this agency that we have now provides a home for about 1,000 women a year and about 744 children. And that's across all programs. Today, I'm just going to be talking about the Women's Justice Program. But it's evolved into an agency that had supportive housing, transitional housing, shelter, and also a small, lovely little house for women, young women who have left the foster care system up in New Rochelle. The transitional program that I want to talk to you about, we have two types. One is that the residents have their own room, but share a kitchen, a living room, and a dining room. And the bathrooms are, they're kind of like a private stall, but it's shared. So it's community living. And the second type of transitional program we have are two residents share an apartment unit, but we also have a shared kitchen and living room, dining room on the first floor. The residents for those transitional programs come directly from Rikers or prison. They can stay for up to officially 18 months. We've had women stay longer. I would say that our average length of stay is probably closer to 12 months. And then we do have permanent supportive housing. We have studio apartments, mixed tenant buildings, and 4 buildings, the largest of which is 44 units. Everything that Providence House runs is very small compared to most of our sister agencies out there that are doing the same work. So, next slide. In specific to our Women's Justice Program, last year we housed 60 women. And so I wanted to match some demographics and service issues. So and I think that these are fairly similar to other programs that run housing for women who have been touched by the legal system. Some of them might have more the people who are mothers higher. We house single women by themselves. So we have more people who are unattached but still have family relationships. So 23% were mothers. And as you know, so there's that whole service issue of family reunification, complicated grief in terms of having lost their child, and their family connections. And then attachment issues, because when you have a significant length of time, there's attachment issues both on the parent's part and the child's part when you're looking at reunification. 98% of the people that we serve have significant mental health issues. 100% of them have trauma histories. But we're part of a consortium, and our expertise is really in therapeutic mental health services. So we tend to get the people who have the higher SMI levels. So that means that it really involves assessment, because one of the things, probably everywhere, but certainly in New York City, to get an accurate diagnosis is difficult. So assessment, medication, referral for psychiatric services, counseling, and support. 47% has a substance use history. So we do practice harm reduction. We do, we have, what do you call it? The testing kit, right at the door for, it just went out of my head. You know what I mean? And we give people sharps containers if need be. 10% it's interesting, this shifts depending on what year and what month it is. But last year, 10% of our folks were over 50. So there are a whole bunch of aging issues, which I think Christina is going to talk about in more depth, because that's a unique set of needs. And then 40% of our people were under 30. So lots of adolescent developmental issues in terms of emotionality and psychological issues. 14% identified as a member of the LGBTQ community. This has a lot of implications for getting correct documents with correct names, folks dealing with an additional level of harassment, and also really, we have some people still working through their identity issues. And 5% had significant health issues. So of course, there are medical services. I would say that that's unusual. I think women coming from Rikers typically have a higher level of health issues. Yeah, IDs are a huge issue, absolutely. Next slide. And if anyone wants to comment or question, add in anytime, please feel free to do that. Providence House provides a trauma-informed program. And so when I say trauma-informed practice, this is a little pet peeve of mine, so I'm just going to vent it now. A staff being trained for 2 hours in trauma is not a trauma-informed practice. Every single one of our staff have 4 full days of trauma training when they come on, and then an additional 2 full days of trauma training every year. Plus, we also have, during the year, we're constantly doing trauma-informed training with our staff in supervision, as well as other places. It is important because for 2 reasons. One is that all of our folks have a history of trauma. Secondly, most of our staff have histories of trauma. And so you can't have people triggering each other all over the place. So that's important. It's also important to pay attention to environment. You need to create an environment where it's calm, it's stable, because again, we're trying to everything is therapeutic. You have this holistic approach of how to reduce stress, how to reduce triggers, how to help people be calm enough to kind of look at their trauma. And one of the things that's very important to me, is that we provide oh, okay, there you go. Go ahead, share the trauma what?
Yeah, I was just sharing. So our last session, we talked a lot about
Mhm.
trauma-informed care. And one thing that a speaker had said, one item a speaker had shared is that for them, trauma-informed care or services is not necessarily a state, but rather a process, which I thought was very insightful. So I wanted to share that in the chat.
Absolutely, thank
Yeah.
you. It is, it's an ongoing process. And so that kind of, so what it says to me is that we create a therapeutic environment which provides relationships and interactions, right? That's where it all sits, that are that are based on mutual respect, rather than manipulation, collaboration rather than coercion, community rather than isolation, nonviolence rather than violence, and equality rather than power imbalance. And this is really particularly important to us because the women who are coming from the legal system have experienced all of those negative things. And so we want to provide the antidote. And so every day we recommit ourselves and refocus ourselves in the morning to say, this is the environment we're going to create. This is how we're going to interact with each other as staff and with our residents. Because it is a process, and it's your goal, but we're human beings. My 21-year-old just graduated college, and I've missed her so much, and I'm so happy they're back. But the amount of dishes in the sink and the clothes around the house make me so crazy that when I get to work, I have to like kind of, refocus a little bit. Maybe I'll take up yoga or something because it's not been good for my energy. So anyway, so trauma-informed practice is key. And I'd like to just skip over one the social environment one and say, every single person who comes to our every resident and every staff member has a safety plan. And that safety plan basically is about what triggers you. What emotions are you comfortable with? What emotions are you not comfortable with? And what happens with the ones you're not comfortable with? And also, how can we help you when you're being triggered? For me, I'm actually an introvert, so I want to be left alone. Somebody else might need to talk it out, right? But if you assume that I need to talk it out, that is going to make me crazier. So again, and so everybody's got a safety plan, staff and residents. We also have a self-care plan because everybody is really bad about taking care of themselves. And we live in a context right now in New York City, well, in the country, right, where everybody's anxiety is higher than it's ever been. COVID, weird things in the air, racial injustice, not in the place where we wanted to be. We didn't make the inroads that we wanted to be. So there's anger everywhere. There's fear everywhere. There's anxiety everywhere. So we're all on that our stress level is higher than normal. And so everybody's more easily triggered. So self-care plans are more important than ever for staff and for residents. So we all talk about, what do you do? And what we do is we kind of do it by week, because the fact of the matter is, if you do it like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this year. As I said, I was supposed to learn yoga about 5 years ago, still hasn't happened. But I can say this week I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a walk in Prospect Park. So that's important for staff as well as residents. And it's all wrapped up in the trauma-informed practice piece. When our folks get back to us, they have to be acclimated to the current social environment. Some of the women who have been in prison have been away for 10 years. The ones we're getting, I think Christine's getting folks who have been even longer. And And, you know, things have changed in 10 years, 15 years. The way you ride the subway is different. You know, Metro cards weren't around. Phones are different. So a lot of acclimating to current social environment if they've been away a long time. We do for everyone. We, you know, daily we're kind of monitoring people's functionality, and that's a component of the fact that a lot of them have SMI, a serious mental diagnosis. So we're, you know, one of the beautiful things about having residences is that you're there in them with the kitchen, you're there, you're seeing people all the time. So you can see if people are starting to shift and maybe decompensate a little bit. So, you know, you want to intervene earlier than later for folks. But even for just folks who don't have SMI, staff, they see themselves as mentors, role models, listening ears. We do not have security. We have resident managers 24/7. They're women, some of them who have been through the same situation as the residents, but have, you know, have a couple of years behind their belt. So I think that that's trying to create that whole level of supportive environment and building a community, because as you know, many of our women are isolated, or the community that they have been with has been a community of drugs, a community of abusive relationships. So what we're trying to do is try to build a new community that's supportive within the house. You know, people who have left, you know, we have people come back and be peer supports to folks. And then my favorite piece is the creative arts. We have a very strong creative arts program. There's movement and dance, and there's also, you know, just play work and art, because trauma sits in the body. And sometimes it's so intense, you can't talk about it, but you can put it, you can get it out there in a non-destructive, overwhelming way through the arts. And so it's been, I think our best add to the program is creative arts. And we also do, we're adding our creative arts therapy program to our supportive housing this year, because it's just been so great for the women at in our women's justice program. Next slide. And, you know, stop me if I'm talking too much, because I can go on forever. So everybody kind of, it gets that's the basic program, no matter where we are really, which program we have. And then, so light touch, things that women who have been involved with the legal system usually need. Everybody needs identity documents. This is a particularly complicated one for our transgendered residents. Because it takes a little longer because you have some legal changes that need to be made. We had one resident, Jennifer, who we were so excited. She applied for a job. She got the job. The job apparently does not give you a check. They send it directly to your bank. But the bank was it that she had, no, she didn't have a bank account, and all her ID was in her dead name. Was in, you know, so what we had to do, the employer wanted to let her go. And we were like, no, you promised to keep her on. We'll work on this and get this set up, you know. But really, like I couldn't believe the employer was like, well, we only do it, you know, so we can't pay her, so she can't work for us. And it was just like, can you hold the job? Give us a month. It was crazy. I had every lawyer, I pulled in so many favors, you have no idea, to get that to go through, but we were able to help her. But anyway, so identity documents are huge. And then, you know, many of them lose their HRA when they're in Rikers. So you have to get that reactivated for folks. And so in between that, you have to help them pay for laundry, food, travel, Metro cards. How are you going to get to your appointments if you have no money coming in? Most of them don't have a connection to PCP. So we help make a connection to the PCP, and that's critical because, again, people with trauma have a higher level of significant mental health, medical health issues. So again, it's really important that not only do they have a PCP, but they actually go at least once or twice a year for the annuals. We often have to accompany them to that because they're not comfortable going by themselves. Explore and encourage community connections. A lot of our folks, when they come off from Rikers, they tell me the same thing. They don't know what to do in their spare time. So we talk about joining a gym, joining a softball team, working in, connecting to a community garden in Brooklyn. People, they don't know what to do with their spare time. We make referrals for recovery groups if that's important. Obviously, we need to ensure that mandates are met. I said, and free time, assist in developing cooking and independent living skills. I have one resident, Shanae, who came to us. She had no ID, right? She had no birth certificate, state ID. Her HRA had been closed. She had really uncontrolled asthma, which really hadn't been addressed well at Rikers. She had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but then they sent her to us with no medication. So we had to really work on getting the medication right away. And she had no cooking skills. And cooking, oh, I'm sorry. Sure. So, and she really wanted to learn how to cook. She was embarrassed being a 40-year-old woman who didn't know how to cook. So HRA is really the public assistance, so that people can at least get a monthly check so that they can afford food and some basics. We work on financial literacy because once people get some money coming in, they have very little exposure to really planning out a budget. Employment has been a challenge for us because we have women mostly with SMI. So most of them, they tend to get on Social Security, SSI or SSD, and most of them do leave us with a 2010E for supportive housing. But if someone's interested, we have a number of people who are going to training in terms of alternative, what is it called? Non-traditional training jobs for women, that sort of thing. We do a lot of psychoeducation in terms of emotion management, positive relationships, communication, and the big one, substitutions for risk-taking behavior. What else could you do that might be fun and exciting than stealing something from a store? What will bring your all of those hormones up without it being something, go for a ride on a Ferris wheel, do something that's more exciting, but less detrimental. And then everybody can benefit, even our staff. We do regular nutrition and wellness education. We have smoothie Tuesdays. We have why not vegetable Wednesdays. We try to make it fun. So we have that goes on through the year. Let's see. Next. So one of the things that's most important is having a really good mental health assessment for our folks when they come. Jen came with us with schizophrenia, non-specified. That was her diagnosis and suffered from auditory hallucinations. I think the diagnosis was correct, although many don't have the correct differential diagnosis, but her medication was off. So her auditory hallucinations were really distracting. She was very depressed, staying in her room because she knew people were reacting to her auditory hallucinations. So a connection to mental health provider is huge. We have an on-site licensed psychiatric nurse practitioner, and that's been huge because she really helps to do the medication monitoring, and helps with the differential diagnosis. So that's made a huge difference for us. We do pretty much, I would say, a regular kind of assessment for depression and suicidality because our folks tend to be high in that range to begin with. We do coordination with the psychiatrists and the therapists and the ACT teams or FACT teams, whoever they're connected with. If people are open to going to substance use programming, we set them up for that. To tell you the truth, I mean, that for us in our transitional program, not in our supportive housing, but our transitional program, it's a requirement because if they're actively using, then they're going to be triggering the other residents. So for us, that's a requirement for our transitional program. And then referral to treatment or rehab if needed. And one of the things that I think our women really appreciate in the transitional setting is we'll hold their bed for them while they're away, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. If they're willing to go to treatment, we're willing to hold their bed so that when they come back, they have a place to go. As I said, we do harm reduction. We do wellness checks every 2 hours in our transitional program. In our supportive housing program, we do wellness checks once a day. If we don't see anybody, if we see them, that's fine. But if we haven't seen someone in the whole day, we do wellness checks just to make sure that everybody's okay. We do have an aging population in our supportive housing. And when you've lived a life where you're self-medicating, your body might be 40, you might be 40, but your body is more like 80. So it's important to do those wellness checks. And then we provide medical and psych support for gender transitioning. We've had a few people who have had top surgery, and we've helped them get through that. So we get people who are still in that transitional part. I'm sorry, I forgot to look at the chat. Let's see. Next one. So, I think the key pieces are for us in transitional, at least, are resolution of the court case. We'll do everything we can. We'll go to court. We'll send reports from the social worker. Jennifer came with us. She had an ankle monitor. We worked to get that ankle monitor off for her. Establishing positive community connections. Again, folks don't know what to do or where to go because they go back to their old places, they're in trouble. We do a lot around emotion management and mindfulness of triggers. It's the very basic. We may not have people who are ready or able or even have the time with us to unpack their trauma, but they can control their triggers and develop emotion management skills. Again, some sort of financial stability, whether it's that they're getting public assistance or they're working or they're getting SSI. And then we start to, them on what kind of housing makes the most sense for them. You can do the next. I think key for any program, and I would say that this is for supportive housing, our supportive housing, as well as for our transitional program, real training in trauma-informed practice, real training in crisis prevention and de-escalation. I think mental health first aid, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't a fan of de Blasio, but I was a fan of the mental health first aid program because I think every New Yorker should know CPR as well as mental first aid. I think cultural competency and cultural humility for both of them. They're two different things. Cultural competency is more of a knowledge-based thing about different cultures. Cultural humility is really looking at your biases and privilege and how do you explore that and keep yourself humble. Understanding that, you know, some of my staff don't have some very old-fashioned ideas about the LGBT community, and so that they need to be trained. You know, when people come in, we ask what their name preference is. You know, we want people to not just be tolerated, people should be welcome. They should feel at home, right? Harm reduction, Narcan, CPR, motivational interviewing, crisis prevention. I think a lot of times staff doesn't know, not the social work staff, but the resident managers. Again, we don't have security, so the resident managers, they don't necessarily know what to do when EMS or EDP come. And they need to know if they're coming on the 12 to 8 or the 4 to 12 shift and we're not around. Person-centered practice. And then we do DBT groups, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's short-term, very practical focused for people with serious mental illness. And so it's been very helpful. And it kind of goes along with emotion management, you know, and positive relationships and those things that our people need to work on. So training for staff is huge, no matter what kind of program you have, and ongoing. You know, I've been a social worker for 40 years. I started when I was 10, and that was a joke. And but you know, I learned something new. The practice changes. What we learn and know changes. So people should always be updating. Next slide. And now, you know, moving to supportive housing. We have 2 residents who have been with us. Jen is the one with the serious auditory hallucinations. She's now getting injections. She's stabilized, and now she's moving as a community tenant to supportive housing. So we are so excited about that. And we're excited that she's going as a community tenant, but she'll still be able to use supportive housing services and support. So we're psyched about that. And another one is also going into as a community tenant. And I think she's just nervous being on her own, but once she gets on her own, then she'll probably go out to independent living. So supportive housing can be a stepping stone out into the community for folks too. You know, and you know, our folks have barriers. But you know what? I'm gonna let Christine take over because I was talking for a long time. And you could see what they are. I don't have to read them to you. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much for that presentation, Rita. This was very helpful. And thank you for that deep dive into all the services that your organization offers, from light touch to more intensive. And again, I think you really touched on the point that, you know, of course, the justice involved population, they all experience some form of trauma, although they may express it differently. So certainly training staff to make sure they're able to understand that, to adapt accordingly, but also just creating a supportive environment in addition to those support services. So thank you again so much for that information. I do want to do a quick check-in with everyone before we move on to Christina. Georgina, Quinette, Ed, do you have any questions for Rita before we move on? If not, we can just save it for the end, but do want to do a quick check-in with the 3 of you.
No questions at this time for me.
Great.
No questions on my part, but I thank you guys for, you know, all that you do for your clientele. I know Georgine mentioned this earlier. We don't actually provide certain services to clients specifically, but we're more of a referral, you know, referring them to, you the agencies that they can help, that can help them with, the social and services that they need. And, this is a good webinar, at least to get a better understanding of what we should be giving our clients, and, what things can actually help them in the long run. So I thank you for allowing us to join this this webinar itself. Thank you.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, great. So now I will pass it on to Christina. Christina, we're excited to hear.
Thank you, Brianna. So again, my name is Christina Green. I'm the Director of Supportive Housing for the Osborne Association. And Rita, you are a hard act to follow. So I didn't include half the stuff that you did. So I'm a little embarrassed right now, but I will say some of our trainings are very, very similar. Our population is a little bit different, but let me start talking about, excuse me, the Osborne Association. So we've been around 90 years. And we help anybody that's impacted by the criminal justice system. So Osborne is in prisons and jails throughout New York City. We have 5 locations. We have a Brooklyn office, a Bronx office, Manhattan office, Buffalo, and Newburgh office. We have almost 500 employees. And we do work. There's right now, I think there's 40 different programs. You can't hear me? Somebody's having trouble hearing me?
You were going in and out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
That's better.
Osborne right now has about 40 different programs. They change, according to grants at one time to another. But some of them include like workforce development. We have a substance use disorder outpatient program. We have programs just for women. We have also like reset programs for low level like misdemeanors to avoid incarceration. So alternative to incarceration programs. Also for young people, alternative to incarceration. So currently Marcus Garvey is our first housing project of many to come. Marcus Garvey is a supportive housing project. Yeah, okay. All right, so we have 52, it's a brand new building located in Brownville, New York. So it's 52 studio, 1-bedroom apartment. So the criteria for this project is over 50 years of age after long-term incarceration, unstably housed or homeless. So you can go on to the next slide, please. Okay. So the average time of incarceration for the majority, for our residents, the average length of incarceration is 27 years.
Wow.
The least amount of time is 7.5 years, but that's very few. One of our residents just, moved in, he did 44 years. So think about that, just to, put that in perspective, people with numbers from the 70s, 80s and 90s, and then returning home without any family support, without a support. Majority of them have no support system. Their families either moved away or have passed away. So people were incarcerated when they're, predominantly young, very young people. And now they're coming from elderly. So what does that look like? We have our first resident, we just opened last year, June 27th, and we have a very long waiting list already. Including, you can turn it to the next slide. So included when they moved in, what we did, there's some of our residents there. Including when they moved in, we were able to, thankfully from funding, we purchased, they're completely furnished. We also, we purchased like bedding and pots and pans and TVs, and I gave everybody laptops to start off with. We also gave them a grocery gift card. We gave them a laundry gift card. We have laundry on site. We have a gym on site. We have community on site. So we gave them everything. My whole idea was this, and I'll be really transparent. I'm formerly incarcerated. My entire team is formerly incarcerated. I purposely hired this team. We're all over 50 years old. We've all been incarcerated. Some of my staff has been incarcerated over 25 years. Who better to serve this population?
Exactly.
We know what it's like to come home with nothing. And when I put this project together, I was like, you know, I'm gonna put together a community advisory board made up of these residents. And I'm gonna ask them, what kind of services do you want to see? So here's some of the services that we currently have. Some of our deliverables, like uh, we have to connect to primary care within the first 30 days. So
Mhm.
people do have some people that are medically frail that are coming in. So you gotta think they're coming home. Yeah, we do have puppy therapy too. But wellness and chronic care is really highlighted here. So people coming home, 50 and 60 years old, like Rita said, you go in, your chronological age, maybe 50, but from the healthcare on the inside, it might not really look like that. You may come home and have a lot of chronic illnesses. So we do have a lot of classes regarding that. We have direct connection within the first 30 days to primary care. We have John Jay College that comes in and does tech
Oh, nice.
classes. We have Merchants Bank that comes in and does financial literacy. I also have interns. I have a lot of people wanting to volunteer here. I have to tell you, they are a bunch of the most grateful and humble people I have ever met in my life. And I would do this work for free every single day. It is an absolute pleasure to open your eyes in the morning and know that you're making a difference in somebody's life. So we do the Narcan training. We also have, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, we do literacy classes. So some of our residents, they do not have the GED. So Brooklyn Library comes in and I lost you here. Brooklyn Library comes in and they do literacy one-on-one classes and connection to GED. We have a lot of support in this neighborhood. Brownsville community is, one of the neighborhoods that have a lot of disparities. So we've kind of become like a community center. And I also have another program that I invited to sit in through Osborne and connection to a community health worker. So they can work one-on-one. And that might look like, let me show you how to use your cell phone. I've never used a smartphone before. Like Rita was saying, let me accompany you on the train and how to use a Metro card to get from point A to point B. So picture yourself being dropped in New York City after 30 or 40 years of being incarcerated with no support system. So myself and my staff, we are the support system. We have social events. We do, painting and bingo and karaoke. We have residents that teach classes. One of our residents happens to be a phenomenal cook. She teaches our cooking classes. We do motivational Mondays. Somebody will come up with like a motivational quote, and then that'll be our goal for the day. We do a lot of goal setting. And just like I said, our main focus is giving the tools in order to be successful. And every resident is very different. We have some, as you can see, a couple of our residents are in wheelchairs. And that's just an issue in itself. People returning home from incarceration, having handicap accessible apartments for them. So this is their own apartment. There's no, unless they have, from parole or probation, they come and go as they please. We don't enter their apartments. We don't have anything we are here to support them every step of the way, whatever that looks like. A lot of connection to employment and Social Security. Like some of them are a little bit elderly and they're going to do SSI or SSD and things like that. You can go on to the next slide. So here's some data that's kind of like, wow. So this is the aging population in prisons. So let me tell you this. I think back to when you were like 19 or 20 years old. What's the worst thing that you've ever done in your life? I know I wouldn't want to be judged for that. So you're coming home now after 20, 30, 40 years of incarceration, a very, very different person. So oftentimes the people that come here were originally sentenced to life in prison. And right now, as you see, people 50 plus are the fastest growing demographic in prison. By 2030, 1/3 of all incarcerated people will be older, a 4,400% increase over 50 years. That's like, wow. So what threat do you pose the community at 60 and 65 years old? I'm just throwing that out there. Like, what could you possibly, you know what I mean? Next slide, please. So here's the recidivism. So here's a shocking number. Recidivism for people ages 65 and over are less than 1%. Right now, sitting in Rikers Island is about 800 older adults sitting in Rikers Island, with some of them with considerable health issues. And like Emma was talking about earlier, the money that it costs to house them in prison versus on the outside, it costs $550,000 per person
Right.
while incarcerated. You know what kind of supportive housing I could build out
Yeah.
here? Per person. So that to me was like, I highlighted these two data screens. I'm not a data person to me. I mean, I can do it, but to me, these data stats are like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So Osborne is really focusing on, we do have some transitional housing opening up soon, some for women, you know, with Rita, we're working on a project together for women transitioning from Rikers Island. We also have one in the Bronx it's 140 units for men returning home from Department of Corrections. And that'll be transitional as well. But like I said, mine is supportive permanent housing. And thus far we have lost 2 residents in the last year due to death.
Oh,
So
I'm
we've
sorry.
incorporated some like trauma care for not only the staff, but the other, you know, the other residents. We also have a legal clinic, which you might be interested in, coming in to help us with writing living wills and connections.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because we weren't prepared for that. You know, this
Yeah.
is like first of its kind for Osborne.
Yeah.
And they were like, here you go, you can figure it out. And I kind of figured it out as I went by a lot of, you know, mistakes and moving forward. And I just, you know, I went and people passed away and I was like, oh my gosh, we were not prepared for this. What do we do? And as people age, we're going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, most of them will die here. So, you know, not only preparing the other residents, but the other staff and getting healthcare proxies and living wills and things like that, like became really important. So to be honest, we're learning as we go. Thus far, we've been very successful. Prior to this, I ran a program through the Department of Health that had nothing to do with housing. But I was like, you know what? I can learn and I could do it. And here I am. And so far it's been successful because, to be honest, it was just done out of love. And it's absolute. And me and my staff, we just absolutely love the work that we do. And we really do make a difference. And we are trying our best to support our residents throughout. Rita had mentioned something earlier too about budgeting. That's a big thing. You know, oftentimes people had never had their own apartment before. Have never paid, you know, any kind of bills on their own. Like I said, they were incarcerated 19, 20, 21 years old, and they come home and it's like, how do I get a checking account? How do I pay a bill? Now I have to pay a rent. So our funding is through eShy funding.
It is
So
eShy.
that means they pay 30% of their gross income. Some of our residents do have housing vouchers, like Section 8 vouchers, but regardless, it's 30% of their gross income. And then Osborne pays the subsidy for that. And you know, we're here to support them throughout. Every day during our last quarter, we ran 28 individual different kinds of programs. So we have different programming every day. And if a resident comes to me and says, hey, can we start a dance class? Yes, you can. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. You know what I mean? How can we support you? Matter of fact, I was watching a video on another place that people had donated instruments. And I'm like, oh, I have to do that. I'm trying to get some instruments in here. So that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry my presentation was shorter than Rita's, but there you go.
Can I come visit?
Anytime you want.
Okay, we'll talk. Yeah.
I got lunch, coffee, whatever you want.
This is
No
very
worries.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really great. Thank you so much for sharing again. It's really exciting to hear all of these services that are being provided for this population. again, from light touch to more intensive care like supportive housing. Curious, Christina, what has it been like to actually develop this housing? You know, I know usually a social service provider, you know, they're typically very mission driven. So what has it been like to, you know, in your experience, been like to work with, you know, development teams or even property managers as well? What are some of those challenges been like, and how have you been able to overcome them?
So let me just answer Emma's question. No, I am not in the Brooklyn location. I am at a separate location in Brooklyn, in Brownsville. That is downtown Brooklyn. Our Brooklyn location is on Remsen Street. So that's more programming. Ours is supportive housing. So just to answer that question in the chat. So it's been something else. To keep it real. Listen, you're working with, so this was a brand new building. That they constructed, and there was some issues, of course, like air conditioning and heat happened, and there was floods, and there's been a fire, and there's been, you know, I'm not gonna make it like sweet and nice, because there's definitely been issues. And then getting on the same page with the property management company. So I think the most important thing that I've learned over this time, if you find somebody like the right person within any organization, you have to find that right person. And I've gone through a lot of people. So we deal with the billing. You know, I went through like 3 or 4 people to find the right one. And if I had to call supervisors, I had to do it. You know what I mean? Listen, you're not following through. I'm continuing to send it. So it was a learning process. It was a learning process, learning about Ishai. It was a learning process. And some people were helpful, some people not so much. I hired an outside security team, and that's been, you know, challenging too. So, you know, we're paying an outside contractor to come in, and they, you know, we pay them a certain amount of money, and they're only paying the security guards a very small amount. So you kind of get what you pay for, but yet I have a way, I want to hold people accountable. I'm paying you for this service, and this is what I expect. So, you know, some people are mad at me, and that's okay. You know, and that's really okay. And if something breaks, I will call you and haunt you. And if the billing's not right, I will call you and send you emails. And if the security doesn't work, I'll fire you. So I hate to be like that, but like I hold myself accountable. I don't hold anybody else less or more accountable than myself. And we have a job to do and a mission to do, and it's important work. So let's all work together. So I've had to go through several people. And again, it was a learning process. So there was people within different organizations that helped me tremendously. The Fortune Society happened to be friendly with the VP of housing over there. I called her up. I'm like, Anna, can you help me? How do I do this? Do I include electric? Do I not include electric? Like there was no blueprint for Osborne at all. There was no blueprint. So I asked questions, and I reached out to my support team that I've met while doing this work, you know, prior to doing housing, and I asked for help. And I don't feel there's no shame in that. You know, a lot of people are just too proud. And if you don't know, ask somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. So it's been challenging. It is. But you know, within the next few years, we're going to be opening up an additional 3 buildings with the same builders and the same property management group. So now I've learned. Like
So
over the last,
yeah.
So now I know who to deal with, who not to ask, who to ask, and you know, and work from there. You know?
Will they all be focused, Ishai, focused on folks from prison who are older?
Yes. And I did not mention that mine is men and women.
I see that, yeah.
Men and women from long-term incarceration. So these buildings will also be men and women returning after long-term incarceration, over 50 years old. And the other projects, you know, please share what Ishai is for those who may be unfamiliar. So Ishai is a source of fund, and maybe Rita probably knows more than I do, but our funder is the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, the OTDA. There you go, Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma.
So yeah, so you know, part of our, like I said, part of our deliverables is, you know, they request, they're pretty open. You know, I don't have to go through the CAP system. I don't have to. My referrals that thank you. our referrals that I received were primarily from other community-based organizations, like the Exodus had opened
Oh,
up
yeah.
all those hotels, you know,
Mhm.
during COVID. So a lot of them, those were all transitional. Some from Fortune, some from Ready,
Mhm.
Willing, and Able. A lot of other like transitional programs. A lot from Our Children for women
Mhm.
came over and did that. So I was able to kind of sift through the application. So unlike Rita, we don't take people with SMI, serious mental
Mhm.
illness. We don't have the capacity.
Mhm.
We don't have a psychiatrist, psychologist, or nurse practitioner
Mhm.
on staff to deal with it, or a mental health specialist. We do have one of my case managers in her earlier life was a nurse practitioner prior
Mhm.
to incarceration. So we all had these great jobs prior to. So we do have some specialists
Mhm.
here, and it's, you know, we have, you know, from all walks.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, unless anyone else has any questions, that is, yeah, that's it in terms of questions for me. And again, I just want to thank both of our speakers so much. Thank you for your flexibility, for taking the time out of your schedules in order to, educate not only New York, but also Pennsylvania as
Mhm.
well in terms of the different support services that are out there and that are available for the justice involved population. So in terms of opportunities for future engagement, I won't go through the slides, I'll just share it here since we're a small group. At Enterprise, we have a community of practice, which is essentially a network of stakeholders in the field. We have internal Enterprise members, but also it's open to external stakeholders as well. And we're really just looking to build a cross-sector partnerships that are actively addressing these housing barriers. So it's a very broad spectrum, but really it's for educational purposes.
Mhm.
So if the organization is interested in joining, Georgina, please feel free to reach out to me. I just put my email address in the chat. And we're also planning to release a national resource. We're putting together a national resource aimed at teaching housing providers how they can also provide housing for this population. So again, I put my email in the chat, so please feel free to reach out if your organization, particularly from a legal standpoint, has any interest in that or knows any housing providers that are interested. And yeah, I see Emma also included something for CSH, so I will pass it on to her. Okay, she put it in the chat.
Yeah, CSH offers loans for nonprofits who want to develop supportive housing and affordable housing development, whether it's new or like refurbished. And as I mentioned, we do it nationally, so we definitely would love to start sinking our teeth in this into Pennsylvania, actually specifically. So if you know of colleagues who are interested in developing, here is our a staff person who actually works in Pennsylvania. So Michael Tellisford. And let me put the link in the chat as well if you want to see what other loans we offer.
Great. Fantastic. And I'm also going to include another link as well for all earlier sessions that we have had. This will also be, this was recorded, so this will also be posted on the Enterprise website for everyone to see. So again, thank you so much. I see in the chat, thank you for presentation. Information was powerful. Okay, great. Everyone, again, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your days.
You too.
Take care.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Take care.